Welcome to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. In today's episode, myself, Christina Hathaway, licensed marriage and family therapist, is going to talk about how your beliefs around yourself affect how you show up in your relationships. How do the beliefs that you've created through childhood create your own insecurities that then you act on and create the outcomes in relationships you do not desire? So if you're ready, I want you to listen up and lean in because I'm about to elevate your mind. What's up, guys? I am here by myself. You're going to get me sometimes. You'll get Amanda sometimes. You'll get us both sometimes. Might be on Zoom sometimes. You also get some guest stars and Q&As. So look out on Instagram as we are going to be doing Q&As here to answer your questions as we have an amazing audience. But today I wanted to jump on and really talk about how our beliefs around ourselves affect our relationships. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring this up is I had something happen to me in the past month that really triggered me in some of my old shit. But during that time, I had to also realize that that person was working from their old shit, right? So I'm going to give you just a little story about myself in regards to relationships. So in my upbringing, my mom lost her mom when she was very young. My mom was 33 and it really wrecked her. It wrecked, the family dynamics and ultimately our family dynamics. She, therapeutic impression, had some issues with her own grief and depression. And as a child, I very much wanted to keep her happy. And so I learned to perform, I learned to dance, I learned to do all of these things that ultimately I thought, this would be the thing to keep my mom happy. And as I grew up, I realized that my role in life was to be a caretaker and a people pleaser. And what I started doing was caretaking my friends. When we moved from LA to Arizona, I would buy my friends stuff from the ice cream man, just buying their love. Then it became getting into relationships and trying to get the love that I needed filled by boys, right? And doing things for them to make sure they were always happy. Even if they didn't ask me, I would do these outlandish things to try to get them to love me. When in all reality, they were just as broken as I was, right? But I thought if I could just, buy them more things or be prettier or look great or even get them to be in a place in their lives that made them feel good about themselves, then all would be solved and my life will be happy. I mean, girls, I've literally co-signed on cars. I have twice. I have, given one dude part of my student loans to help him financially. Like, what the fuck? I think about it now and I'm just like, seriously, girl. However, I was just in this place. And ultimately, that led me to becoming a therapist. And therapy for me was my life, looking at other people and figuring out how can I fix them. In regards to my relationships, I've now called them my fixer-uppers, but as a therapist, I was trying to be a fixer-upper as well. The problem was I never dealt with my own shit, my own trauma around caretaking it where it came from. And the fact that through that process, and this is nothing to say against my mom, she went through a really traumatic time. There's other things I'm not going to discuss out of respect of her that happened during this time, but she was not able to be the mother that I needed her to be, even though she tried very, very hard. Okay. So, there were unmet needs in that moment that didn't happen for me. And I was trying to fill those needs by taking care of everyone else and fixing everyone else up. And what was happening, it was at the expense of myself. I was not treating myself kindly. And more importantly, because I was trying to put my worth into other people's behaviors, I ultimately felt like a failure because guess what, guys? You are only in control of yourself. Nobody can control you, nor can you control anyone else. Your control comes from your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, and being able to speak on all of them. At the time, I didn't realize that. If I just got the boyfriend, if I just got out of college, if I just got the job, if I was just skinny enough, if I was just pretty enough, then I would be okay. And unfortunately, what was happening in my mind is it was always not enoughness. I would look at what I didn't have. I would compare to other people. I got so insecure at one point in college that I thought every guy wanted to date my friends and would act on that belief. Like, I remember this poor guy, Mike, super sweet guy, was one of the regulars at the bar that I bartended at, like, came to watch football. And we went on a double date with one of my girlfriends who's beautiful, love her so much. This was not at her at fault at all. And after we left, I'm like, "Oh my god, you believe she's prettier than me. Like, it's okay." Like, I made up this whole narrative when he's like, "No, actually, I like you, but now you're psycho and I'm out." Right? And so it only fed into the belief that I wasn't good enough. Right? And, I went through a relationship for about 3 years that 3 months into it, I knew wasn't for me. But because I was someone who constantly was like, "I can help you. I can fix you," I stayed for 3 miserable years. The only good thing I got out of it is my dog and some lessons learned. And, I put myself through hell in an effort to try to change this person and make them better. Having them, try to go to college, getting him the job that he had, like doing all of these things, thinking, okay, once we get past this point, it's all going to be okay. But the problem is I wasn't okay. And that's a big problem, right? There is a true statement or sentiment of you have to love yourself before you can love anyone else. And I just wasn't in that place. And so I went on, dated another guy who was very sweet. Honestly, I didn't really want to date him. My friends really liked him and they're like, "You should date him. You should date him." And I was like, "Fine, I'll date him." And the problem was I ended up liking him, but because I was such a hot mess and now I'm practicing therapy, I wasn't taking care of myself, is I began taking it out on him, right? He wasn't at the place he wanted to be in his life. I was getting frustrated with him for that. Anytime I felt that he was taking advantage of me, I would scream, I would yell at him, I would say things like, "I'm not your mom, be a man, da da da." And it was toxic. This poor, poor guy. I've since seen him and I was like, "I'm so sorry." Like, you didn't deserve that. And I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve it. Right. And so he breaks up with me for good reason. And it was one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Now, that breakup was tough. I remember I owned my own house, which he was living in. And I'm sitting in my living room just thinking, I've got to help. I got to get help. Luckily, I had already gone through this training on codependency, like the training that I use now. But what I wasn't doing is really looking at myself. And in that moment, it was like a flood of like a rush of water over me. Just, hey, all that stuff you've been learning? Maybe it's time for you to apply it to yourself. So I actually, this is a totally true story, called a therapist and was like, "Hi, do you have an opening today? Because I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I lost a ton of weight during this breakup." And I said, "Also, do you have 2 hours?" And she's like, "Actually, yes." And I went to see her. And for the first time in my life, I told her everything. This woman probably went through 2 of those yellow like notebooks just with all my shit and began the process of therapy. On top of that, I began the process of also understanding the power of my mind. At the time, there was a book called The Secret that really talked about manifestation. Now, I'm not going to talk about manifestation per se, because now as a clinician, I realize what was working and is what we call the reticular activation system. It's the filter that we see ourselves through. It's basically a filter that our brain uses because there's so much stimuli out there in the world that if we took everything in, we'd get very overwhelmed. So what it does instead is it looks for the familiar, for the thing that we're thinking of. And one of the things that people really resonate with is when I talk about when you go to test drive a new car. So you get, like, we have a white 4Runner. Then you all of a sudden see white 4Runners everywhere. That's your reticular activation system. And so not only am I doing therapy to really work on the underlying beliefs, but I'm also working on how to change my mindset. And I learned through this experience how to change that and the power of mindset. And that's why my whole life, all my businesses, this podcast, everything is around the power of mindset. And it was when I started to look at my life and look at what I had, look at my wins, my positives, my strengths, begin to imagine a life greater than what it was, and believe and have faith that that was something that I deserved because I am human, I am worth it. There's nothing special about me, but if I believe and I have faith, then it can come true for me. And on top of this, again, healing from those past wounds, and ultimately, that led me to a relationship. And the way I explain this is it's a relationship that I want, I don't need. And a relationship I don't need means I'm not dependent on him for any reason. He's not filling a void. He's not making me feel worthy because I'm taking care of him. He's not making me feel good about myself because he tells me I'm pretty. I wanted a relationship. I did not need a relationship, nor did he need me. And that is really important. So that's why I want to talk about how our beliefs about ourselves affect our relationships. And so the first thing I want to talk about is simply that. What do you say about yourself? If you're single or even in a relationship, how do the beliefs about you affect how you show up in your marriage or in your dating relationship? Oftentimes I hear people create these narratives. If a guy or girl doesn't text back in a certain amount of time, we instantly think they're not interested in me. They think I'm gross. They think I'm ugly, like, da, da, right? It's because I'm insecure about myself. I think I'm not interesting. I think I'm not worthy. I think that the other person is constantly judging me, right? And the first indication of that, I'm going to go to my behavior of peace, gotta go, right? Or I'm going to do the other behavior. So that's the pull away. I didn't really think I was going to get into this, but hey, we're just flowing, right? So that's the pull, like I pull back. Or I'm going to go into the behavior of pushing, like, hey, you haven't responded back to me. Is everything okay? And that person's like, dude, I'm working or I'm in a conference or whatever. And they're like, give me some room, right? So you push, and guess what happens to them? They pull away, right? Simply because of this belief that they don't like you because they haven't texted you back in X amount of time, right? That's a really, really normal thing for a lot of my clients to go through. For those of you who don't know, I do have a separate uh, branch of the Mindset and Matter coaching, which is dating and relationship coaching, because I still enjoy doing this work, but I only hold a handful of those clients because it is more of my time, and it is a lot of work, and I like to have really clear boundaries around that. So the first thing I want you to think about is, who do you think you are in a relationship? What do you think you like? How do you feel seen and heard in your life? And this is really, really important to note. Is your feelings of being seen and heard from childhood through caretaking? Is it through achievement? Is it through rebelling? Is it through, perfection, right? What made you get seen and heard in your childhood? And how have those interactions in your upbringing, how have they manifested into the thoughts you have about yourself today? Now, again, these are the same beliefs that affect your dieting, that affect your exercise, the same beliefs that interfere with you doing hard things or taking chances or getting outside of your comfort zone. But today we're talking about how they affect your relationships, right? So let's just use one of those. If I am a caretaker, I'm going to walk into a date and I'm only going to focus on if they are happy with me. I'm not going to say this to my girls all the time. Did you even recognize if you fucking liked this dude? They're like, no, I was sitting there thinking how he thought about what I just said. And was he, did he give me the right body language? Did he, whatever. So you walk into the date and you're just paying attention to, do they like me? Am I keeping this person happy? You may not even like the food. You may not even like that type of food in general, but you've decided to go to Chinese food when you know you don't like it because you're a people pleaser, right? So now you're outside of your comfort zone. You're doing something for someone else. That in itself that in itself is going to affect how you show up to that date, right? I already don't want to be here. And now I'm just going to play this facade. Now, the problem with the facade is eventually, so say this person's like, oh, I love her. She's really easy. She likes all the things I like. You're giving them false promise, right? She likes all the things I like. But eventually, the true, authentic you is going to come out. You're going to have a crack in your armor and they're going to see you for who you are and they're going to be blindsided and just be like, what the fuck? Right? The other problem though is the beliefs that we have about ourselves often attract someone who's the counter to our belief. I often like to say we find people whose bites match our wounds. And so if you're a people pleaser, you're going to find someone who needs to be taken care of. In their family of origin, maybe they were, had helicopter parents, or maybe they had parents that abandoned them and they've never been taken care of. And so they're looking to fill that void. And this, you guys, is where that push and pull happens, right? And so that would be someone who's a caretaker. Someone who's a perfectionist is going to try to very similarly always look like they're doing everything right. They're always going to talk about all the things they do, their accomplishments. They're going to be kind of, gloating. And the other person, they're going to be like, oh God, they can be intimidated by that. That's why a lot of people say like men are intimidated by assertive women, which yes is true. But how are we asserting ourselves? Are we asserting ourselves? Or are we walking in with armor of look at me, I'm better than you? Because better thanness, as we talked about in this podcast, comes from the same trauma as less thanness. It's just another way of expressing it. And so I'm perfect, look at me. Even if that person stays with you, they've put you on a pedestal and you constantly have to portray this perfect version of yourself. And guess what? That eventually goes away. And like I said before, if you're on a pedestal, guess what? You fall down. And when you fall down, this person's going to be blindsided again by this false promise that you've provided them. What's up, guys? Quick interruption from our show sponsor, the Mindset of Matter Coaching, and an invite to you to our absolutely free webinar mastermind on rewiring your mind, breaking free from compulsive eating and overtraining. In this webinar, you will get access to me, Coach Christina Hathaway, licensed mental health therapist, certified personal trainer, and nutrition coach, to walk you through every single step of the mindset method. But more importantly, you get to share your story. You get to share your struggles, and I get to coach you during this mastermind. And so if this is something you're like, yes, I would love to be coached by Coach Christina, I want you to check out the show notes below for our registration. The webinar will be on May 16th at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I would love as many people as possible to attend. If you do attend live, we also will be giving away a free gift. So it's always a plus for you to be there. Obviously, again, I get to see your face. So again, that's May 16th at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Now, back to elevating your mind. So not only is it our upbringings, but how we think about ourselves. If we're always a victim to our circumstances, if you believe someone feels a certain way about you, a negative way, for example, say you think someone's annoyed with you, you don't ask clarifying questions, you don't ask them if that's true, then you continue to interact with this person. They have no clue that you feel that way. And everything they do is going to fall under the lens of they're annoyed with me, they don't like me, they think I'm stupid, whatever it is. So then that person is sitting here just, doing their thing. And you have this whole story that you've created about them. And if you're like some people, you will literally respond to them through this story, maybe even tell them, you're annoyed with me. I can see it. You did this, 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 and this. And they're just like, what? And that is really disrespectful in regards to relationships you care about, because you're not respecting that they have their own way of thinking and feeling. You've decided for them. And then not only did you decide for them, you have feelings towards them that are really in this, in that case, you might be mean, you might be condescending, you may be even a little bit toxic. And they're just like boundaryless to this spew of venom that you're spewing at them, right? And we've got to really start with the beliefs, right? What you say in your mind, you see in the mirror, or in this case, you say to that person. So, what are your beliefs? Are we the victim? Do we feel like we have to be perfect? Do we feel like we're only concerned if other people see us as good? If the guy says, yes, she's the one, she's the, I think they call it the, oh, I don't remember what they call it now, like the go girl, like the girl, the pick girl that they pick, right? You guys are in, I'm 41. You're like, oh, it's this. And I'm like, yeah, aging. Um, we've got to go and we've got to understand those beliefs. What are the beliefs? Because guess what? If you keep dating the same person over and over again, it's you. Hi, you're the problem. It's you. Technically, you're both the problem. However, your picker is off, my dear. You've got to figure out why. Why am I attracting this same person over and over and over again? What about this is comfortable for me? Why do I find comfort in this dysfunction? Oh, what does this remind me of in my childhood? Oh, this reminds me of my dad when he was having a temper tantrum because he didn't know how to, manage his emotions. And so now I'm attracted to these little fuck boy, like children men that, have these big blow ups so that they can, make me feel like an asshole. They're having a temper tantrum. I'm just like, I don't know what to do here. But then I take care of them because that's what I did with dad. And now here we are repeating this cycle over and over again. And not only with him, but with the next guy I date too. It's you. You've got to figure out the common denominator. What is it? What are your things? What are the unmet needs that you're trying to meet in relationships? Right. And I'm talking about romantic relationships. This is true in friendships. This is true with your children. Right. I very much can relate with a lot of parents who create narratives about how their children feel about them, which ultimately are actually how, they felt in their own childhood. And that can cause their children their own mental struggles. But we'll just stick with romantic relationships right now. So we have to understand the beliefs about ourselves. And then secondly, what behaviors do we do when we're in that belief space? I've seen it all. I've seen the you're mad at me. Why are you mad at me? Like da da da. Like completely. Oh, I was watching Vanderpump Villa and the girl. So there's a girl and a guy that dated. They're kind of like this rocky couple. And this new girl comes in. She's really, really pretty. And the girl of the couple walks up to the guy and it's like, you're being weird. Do you think she's pretty or something? And he literally doesn't say anything to her. Right. So that's her reaction. Like, I'm just going to assume this for you. And then I'm going to ask you about it without clarifying, without even having a conversation. I am going to mind read you and then treat you in a way based on that mind reading. Right. Or do you ghost? When things get a little weird or maybe vulnerable, you run away. You're like, fuck this. This is too much for me. I don't know what vulnerability is. I've never had someone be vulnerable with me because my parent was always gone working all the time. Again, not your parents' fault, but you get it. Do you go into like caretaker mode? One of my clients, we call it her sparkle. It's her constant sparkle. She wants everyone to see her sparkle. But the problem is she can't always sparkle. Neither can you. And when the sparkle dulls and they see her for who she is, they run away because they thought, oh, I don't have to be emotional with this girl. She's just happy go lucky. Everything's easy. And I don't have to get too deep with her. But she wants to get deep. She's just afraid of getting deep. So, what behaviors based on your beliefs do you engage in? Are you, criticizing people? Do you run away from people? Do you take that victim stance? You're hurting me. Do you caretake people? Do you try to up the perfection? Do you buy people, right? What is it that you do? Or do you just not even have close relationships because you're so fearful? This is for more of my, and we haven't even talked about the avoidant type or the, attachment types, which we can talk in detail another time. But for my anxious avoidants who are just, they want a relationship, they get in a relationship, it's too much for them. So then they avoid the relationship. But they don't like to be alone. So they're just kind of in this like middle fucked up ground, right? What are the behaviors? And ultimately, what behaviors, like how do those behaviors create your outcomes? Another way to do this, guys, is work backwards. Like, My outcomes are I keep dating the same person. What are the behaviors that lead up to me ultimately the demise of my relationship? And what do I believe about myself based on those behaviors? That's another way to do it. You can do it forward or backwards, depending on whatever you need. And so this is going to give you insight to why relationships are a struggle for you. Then the most important part of this is understanding what unmet needs those beliefs came out of. Again, did I not learn how to share my emotions? Was I scared to do that because I grew up in an environment where it was not safe or treated kindly to do that? Are my unmet needs the fact that I've never had someone take care of me, so I don't trust anyone to take care of me? So I just kind of run away from people because of that? Or are my unmet needs that I put everyone else before myself and really I need to prioritize me and take care of me and love me and give me that same amount of love and care and worship that I gave these other people? Figure out the unmet need. That's the place to start. Well, that's the second place to start. First place is understanding and knowing. Then you go through the whole method, right? So we know what's going on. We know that we don't want to continually attract the same person. We name it. That's my perfectionism. That's my caretaking. The belief that I'm only good if I'm only seeing worthy if, right? Then noticing it, start noticing it in your marriage, start noticing it in your dating relationship, start to recognize the triggers around it, the emotions you feel, and then nurture it, right? Nurturing it is not only nurturing it if you're already in a relationship and saying, hey, I'm really working on changing this aspect of me so I can be a better partner, but also a better person. And I hope that you are okay with me making some changes. It might seem weird for you. Is that okay? And can we keep this conversation open? It's an awkward conversation, but it's necessary, right? But then also beginning to meet your needs for yourself. It is the most important thing that you can do because when you start trusting yourself, you start recognizing your worth, you start recognizing what you deserve and what your level, like what respect means. If I respect myself, then I have to demand respect from others. But when I don't respect myself and I'm talking negatively to myself and I'm, being, just flooding with self defeating beliefs, then why would I ever get that from somebody else? Right. And so working with a therapist, a coach, there's wonderful books out there. How to Be the Love You Seek by Dr. Nicole LaPera or How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LaPera. She and I are very similar in our thinking around relationships. My training is post-induction therapy. She is a psychologist, so it may be a bit different, but it's all basically the same. And recognizing what can I do for myself? I need to nurture myself. And remember, this is a process. This is a process like building muscle. This is a process like getting the physique that you want. This is the process of, getting a degree. This is going to take time. But even in my story, it only took me I would say about a year. Mark and I met about 6 months into this, but it wasn't until a year into it. And this is a really crazy story. And some of you might be like, really? I about no, this is a year into our relationship. About 6 months, no, 6 months into our relationship, I dropped the L bomb, "I love you." And he was not able to tell me back. And people were like, "Well, that's an issue." And I'm like, "Not to me. I feel loved by him. He treats me kindly, he treats me with respect, and I'm gonna respect the boundary that he is not ready to say it. But I'm not gonna run because he can't say it. I feel it. And really, aren't we just seeking the feeling?" And then eventually he told me he loved me, and 6 months later, he was proposing. So the dude's got his own timeline. But, the work is hard. And It takes time, but I guarantee it's so worth it whether you want a relationship or not, right? We're talking about romantic relationships, but here's the thing too. Mark and I actually broke up 4 months into dating, and he was like, "I don't want a girlfriend." I was like, "Okay." I was spending a lot of time with him at that time, but he wasn't ready. And I knew so clearly I deserve someone who wants to be with me. He is telling me he doesn't want to be with me. And so I'm leaving. I didn't text him. He didn't text me. I left, started dating other people. And the reason why, well, yes, it was hard, but I normally in the past would have been devastated, devastated, world rocked, devastated. But I wasn't because I knew what I deserved. I believed in what I wanted and what I was going to receive and continued on that path. Now, story goes 2 months later, we ran into each other and have been together ever since. And so for me, it was really whether I was in a relationship, out of a relationship, I knew who I was. And also, that's very helpful in understanding like you're okay if you're alone too. When you meet your own unmet needs, you're never alone. You're with yourself. And being with yourself right now may feel very scary. It can be very vulnerable. It can be very uncomfortable. But when you do this work, you change the beliefs, you change your own behaviors towards yourself, and you change your own outcomes. And the outcomes become I trust myself and I'm okay with being myself. And if I'm okay with being with myself, then I'm also okay with being alone. When I'm okay with being alone, that means I don't need anyone. If I want a relationship, I can seek one. If I don't have to seek one. And so you guys can see how your mindset, your beliefs affect how you show up in your romantic relationships. I cannot wait to speak about this more. If you are interested in dating coaching, as I mentioned, I only hold a few seats for this. And right now I'm full. But you can email me at igniteambitionlc@gmail.com. If you're interested on coaching the Mindset of Matter, our coaching program does also touch on this. We are holistic, and every part of yourself the different parts of yourself, are physical, mental, emotional, social, right? Existential or spiritual, which there's a part of that too. Environmental, right? And that social aspect, that connection piece is very important. And even in our coaching program, it is so well-rounded that we are touching on these things because we know through the program your beliefs about yourself. And so we can remind you, oh, hey, remember that's something you struggle with. How can we show up to your husband or your partner differently so that you can get your needs met or whatever it is? So our coaching program, even though we are also focusing on your eating, your nutrition, it is an aspect of who you are, and it's an aspect of your mental health. And so if you're interested in that, you'll find our Clarity Call link below. For me, if you like this information, you can find me at Mindset of Matter Coaching. Again, I will speak to this here on this podcast. It's not necessarily something that I put as much effort into. I used to have a whole Instagram on this and so on and so forth, but Instagram is hard to keep up on. But I hope you guys enjoy these little bouts of my expertise in relationships. Again, you can find me at IG at Mindset of Matter Coaching. You can find me on YouTube at The Mindset of Matter, as well as on TikTok. And if you have any questions about this, please put them in the show notes below. And as always, remember this: what you say in your mind, you see in the mirror. Goodbye.